Welcome to a special episode of Cross Lines. Today, we bring you exclusive coverage in partnership with Forbes magazine, examining the economic situation in Iraq, both locally and in the context of region that is shaking global energy markets. Joining me today as a co-interviewer is Ken Silverstein, a veteran American business journalist and senior contributor at Forbes, who has covered the global energy sector and climate issues for over 14 years. And our guest is engineer Ali Jabbar Muhammad, an Iraqi expert in crisis and risk management with over 2 decades of international experience. He is the first Iraqi engineer to hold advanced executive certification from Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government and MIT, and has worked with international agencies since 2003 on Iraq's reconstruction and institutional developments. This is Cross Lines. Let's begin. So Ken, you have something in your mind to ask Ali. So can you start with it, please?
Yes. Hi, Ali. It's nice to see you in person. We spoke on the phone earlier, and I really look forward to speaking with you more fully on these subject matters. My first question is really one that it will set sort of the landscape and give an American-based audience a little broader understanding of the region. And so I want to talk about the Iran and Iraq war, one of the most devastating wars of the 20th century, 8 years long and hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed. But in the decades since that time, Iran and Iraq have become critical energy partners. And now these two countries are at the center of a war that is shaking global energy markets. If you're a Forbes reader in New York or London, how does this geography and these economics build a relationship that history would have not so long ago sort of shirked at?
Well, thank you for having me on this show. Well, to answer this question, we can kind of play back with the history. Let us look to the after the Second World War, what happened between the United States and Japan, for example. They were like the biggest compact that's happened at that time. And look at the relationship between United States and Japan now. They are one of the most strategic allies, well in economy and as well on military and in other sectors. Similar to the situation in Iraq, between Iraq and Iran, we share the longest border, like almost 1,600 kilometer. And also there is number of ties between religion and society. So this is like become one of the foundation for this transition with the relationship between Iraq and Iran, along with now we are linked in high kind of commitment and also transition between trade and also energy. Trade is almost now it's between 11 to 12 billion dollars, the average yearly between Iraq and Iran, and also we depend highly in receiving clean gas to support the power plants in Iraq. So I don't think this kind of a transition between two countries, they fought in certain period of the time and now become like this kind of relationship, especially with two countries close to each other with what we have between Iraq and Iran.
I understand. And so my follow-up question is, if we look at what is unfolding right now, Iraq's deep energy dependence on Iran, is that a matter of just coincidence because you're neighbors, or has that become a strategic mistake, or is that a good idea because everything's okay, or is it simply just the inevitable outcome of the current circumstances, which include geography, infrastructure gaps, in the absence of alternatives. And does that question even matter at this point? And I guess ultimately, maybe from my perspective, I see Iraq maybe looking more like a trusted partner going forward.
Well, I don't think we are lack of alternative in Iraq. The problem is lack of kind of overcome this situation over the years, especially after 2003. What we inherited before Iraq, what we inherited before 2003, also it was a problem with the power and supply the electricity to the national grid. In my opinion, it's not because how we tie with Iran and other matters, but it's lack of wisdom of current and past government to overcome and resolve this kind of crisis. Let's look at what we are talking about, electricity and other sort of powers or energy. Iraq, it's the second largest export in oil, and we sit in like the fourth largest reserve in oil in the world. We shouldn't have this kind of a crisis or problem in when it comes to electricity and other sort of energy, but it's a lack of management. And also, if we look at the numbers, now Iraq rely on like almost 40% of power generation from the Iraqi plants over the country is depends on what we receive from the gas from Iran. This is a lack of management and also reform this kind of issue over the years.
So lack of the management here, as you said, bringing that home to Iraq, like specifically, that dependency is no longer a policy debate. It's playing out in real time on the Iraqi street today. So Iran has now like halted gas supplies to Iraq following the attack on the South Pars fields, as you know, like a few days ago. So we're talking about over 3,000 megawatts takes offline for the Iraqi family sitting at home, So right now, what does that actually mean in terms of hours of electricity per day, and how long can the grid hold, Mr. Ali?
If we look to the days before this conflict start, I'm talking about the war. We have like almost between 16 to 20 hours supply, power, electricity to the city and overall all the cities in Iraq.
Yeah.
With losing this 40% of supplying, which is like almost 5 million cubic meter a day from Iran, this means the supply of the power will like kind of almost lose another 40% of what we generate. In the summer, the peak percentage is we have, or the mega power we should produce between 27 to 30. Yeah. This is according to the Ministry of Electricity. But the demand, it's like almost reach 45 to 50 megawatts in summer months. This means we are already shortage of like almost 50%, losing another 40%. This will knock down the hours of supplying from like almost 16 to 20 to almost 8 to 9 if we are lucky. This means if Tehran shutting down this gas at this time or during summer, Baghdad will sweat.
So, but the Iraqi governments have been like promising energy self-sufficiency for like years. We are now in a crisis that was completely foreseeable. Who is accountable for the fact that Iraq is still, like this exposed? And what can realistically be done right now? Not in 5 years, like I'm talking in the current like situation.
It's too late for blaming whom, because it's very obvious, like years of kind of promising and years of hearing a lot of projects or signing a contract. It was just kind of like in the media. It didn't really exceed that because the reality spoke itself more than anything else. Now is the time to think what we can do. With this current situation, there is no much of alternative method or ways we can use, but at least we can think of expedite the solar farms projects. Also, we could think of the natural gas we can produce in Iraq. There is a huge contract to Total Energy company. Still, this is promising, but it's still behind the schedule. So also, we have a problem with the grid itself. We should maintain and also improve and develop the network, the system in Iraq. And also, there is another issue with collecting fees from the consumer. The ministry, based on the Ministry of Electricity, they are not collecting almost 10% of the power they supply to the government entities and also to the public. So this means we are spending, based on the last 10 or 12 years, more than $80 billion on trying to reform and develop the power sector, and yet we are not at the point where we can rely on this. And this is not really, it's, in my opinion, and there's so many reports, like international report talking about Iraq and the situation of lacking of kind of overcome this kind of situation. It's really shame on whomever we can identify they are the head of managing this sector.
So, Ken, like you've been tracking this from the outside, does what we're seeing like in Iraq match the global picture? And also, like, the mic is yours, Ken.
Well, so Ali and I had the pleasures, as I alluded to earlier, of speaking yesterday. And so I sort of broadened the conversation to not just include oil and natural gas, but also the rare earths, the raw materials that go into making windmills, electric batteries, solar panels, the instruments that are at the center of the green energy economy. And so I'd like to shift to that direction now, and how this current geopolitical situation, that is the current war now in Iran, how that's impacting the green energy economy. So 2 years ago, about 2024, the Houthi attacks shut down Tesla's Berlin factory, and that was a warning sign. Now the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. Iraqi oil output as a result of this has dropped from 4.3 million barrels a day to about 1.4 million. And so for my readers, is clean energy a panacea here, or is it just another victim of this, of the geopolitical circumstances?
What we see now, there is no sectors been secured, been affected by what happened in the region. In other words, when oil sector or energy sector is sick, all other sectors in the world, they will be sick, because yes, green energy, it's like kind of independent, kind of build itself, but it still rely on many factors to be successful. One of them is the supplying the chain, the global supply chain. It's one of the factors can succeed or successfully help the green energy to kind of improve or not. Matter of what we're looking at now, from the Red Sea, almost 12 to 10% of the world trade is going through this kind of sea route. Been affected by two factors. One, the price of the vessels, renting the vessels or charter the vessels, it's went up. It's like almost from like the in the normal days between 100 to 150 to 400 and above that, and also the insurance on companies also raised their rate almost 3 times triple, which mean most of the transportation company also they raise or increase their cost. This is ultimately affect the green energy sector as well. And also, if we look to the world map, we are not too far from the sources of the element it been used for this kind of business or line of business, and like producing electric vehicles, batteries, and others. China is one of the major companies. Almost 70% of the processing materials is coming from China. They've been hit by losing almost 45% of their supply from the crude oil and other sources. This means it's been like kind of a chain, it's been affected. So, and basically, in one word, nothing in the world now is safe and secure of what's happening in the region.
So, Ken, what about the cobalt from the Congo? Like,
yeah, I was going to say when we talk about mining cobalt from the Congo or lithium being processed in China, the rare earths all move through these same maritime corridors as does liquefied natural gas or oil. So will that disrupt EV manufacturing, battery producers, clean energy investors, and how exposed are they at this moment? And is the market pricing these risks accordingly? In other words, if you mine it in Africa, you got to get it processed in China, and China has to send the product ultimately around the world. So to what extent is the overall supply chain disrupted?
Because again, it's highly exposed because of the transportation, one of the main factor. The increase on the cost, it will reflect on the cost of building this kind of technology and like batteries, transporting from Congo to other regions. All this materials need basic services or like kind of supported services like transportation, storages, other factors they can kind of supply or support their this kind of businesses in the world. So any like kind of factors could be related as a chain to increase the cost and everything. This is why we called like in economy or management, it's if we have a problem with one of the elements, all the others they will be kind of be hit and depends on how much they rely on this type of services.
So from Baghdad's perspective, like that question looks very different. Like for Iraq specifically, the Strait closure is like not an abstract market risk, you know? It's an existential economic event happening right now. So Iraq's oil exports are down roughly like 70% right now, as you know. The government was earning like over 6 billion a month from oil. That revenue is like has like largely stopped. What does a prolonged closure actually like mean for government salaries, infrastructures, projects, and basic services? How long can the budget like absorb this, Mr. Ali?
Look at the numbers again, how much we lost in Iraq. Based on the current situation with what's going on in the region, Iraq will lose between 200 million to 300 million a day from oil revenues. This means it's like almost we are losing between 45 to 50% of the oil revenue in ordinary days. To kind of compensate this from other sources. The only rely sources we can, or the government they can do, it's lending from the central bank or other internal banks in Iraq. This means the number or the deficit, it will be higher, and also the volume of lending, it's also will be higher than used to be. If we look at again to the numbers, we are consuming, or Iraq consuming, between 65 to 70% of the oil revenue only to cover the salary bill.
Yeah,
this
for
is
those
way
players.
too high.
It is.
And the remain, it will be used for any other expenses like services and others. Lacking of to cover that, this will kind of generate another problem and crisis in Iraq. So, and what we have as a reserve currency in Iraq is between 95 to like almost 97 billion dollars as a U.S. currencies. It's reserved in the central bank. If we look to the number, how many months, probably we can use this for like almost 10 to 12 months, but this will be high risk, and also especially we don't have alternative or any other sources to kind of compensate what we lose from the oil.
Yeah, but the Kirkuk Jihan like pipeline through Turkey was supposed to be like the backup, as you know. But the war and the attacks like have shut down like Kurdish production through the route too. So is there any realistic alternatives export like path right now, or is Iraq like genuinely like landlocked economically?
Iraq produced between 3.6 to 4 million barrel per day. What we lost now, it's above 2 million. We export in the normal days between 3.4 to 3.6. We lost almost 2 million. This means Jihan and Kirkuk line, if it will work, it will not kind of make it up what we lost. It's like Jihan, hardly they can make between 200 to 300 up to 400 barrel per day. And if we work with Jihan and Kirkuk, it will be maximum capacity they can reach to almost 170 to 200 thousand barrel per day. This means no way we can compensate what we lost from like knocking down or shut down what we have now according to or based on the current situation. So what we're doing from the north, it's already been calculated what we export in general, and to kind of make it up for what we lost, which is almost 1 million. Kirkuk Jihan is not going to make it. And if we think of alternative, there is no other like kind of solution as of now. The only solution we could think of is by truck. And also this is not kind of really efficient solution to the current situation.
Mr. Erlach, thanks a lot for joining us today, and Ken as well. Unfortunately, like we're reaching the time of the interview, so we'll continue with the next part for sure in a couple of days. Thanks a lot for joining us, Ali, Ken. You enlighten us with an amazing perspective. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Have a wonderful day.